chapters, they discovered that their tunnel was caving in. But Mama, she really joins in the efforts, and after being demoted, so knocked down at her job, she decides the tunnel is their only hope. So that was kind of the motivating factor for her to start joining in on the digging and believing in it. Goethe plans on stealing the door from the top floor of the Welcome Building at night to help repair the tunnel where it's caving in. Okay. We spent the remainder of the evening working in the tunnel. With Mama's help, we made far more progress than ever before. She suggested we concentrate our efforts on deepening the tunnel and not to worry about spreading out the dirt anymore. It was a good plan while you needed it, she said, but if the Grenzers come back for another investigation, they'll find the tunnel anyway. So I want you to think about new perspectives that Mama is bringing to the tunnel. So it's just been Fritz and Goethe this whole time. Now they have another person helping them who's got fresh eyes and a new strength. So think about how that's changing their ability to tunnel faster, better, and hopefully reach their goal. So we piled the dirt up in the basement, similar to how we had done it at first. Mama showed me how to pack it down with the bucket so that more would fit into the same space, and so that it wouldn't fall all over. While Fritz continued to build supports for the sunken area, Mama dug and I hauled dirt. I hadn't thought she'd be as strong as Fritz, but she dug with ferocity I'd never seen before. So ferocity is intensity, ferocious, almost angry. This is the strength of a mother fighting for her children, she said. When you have children of your own, you will understand. I should have been here with you from the first day. We should have told you from the first day, I said. For the first time possibly ever, my mother and I were on the same side of an argument. They finally have this shared purpose, don't they? And I want you to think about how this is bringing them closer together. Now that they're both kind of on the same side of things, they both agree. When we took a rest shortly before curfew, Fritz suggested Mama should return to the apartment and make noises to cover for our absence. If someone is listening, they need to think we're all at home. I won't leave you both here overnight. We'll get the door, then sleep here in the tunnel, Fritz said. That'll mean Goethe and I can start working first thing in the morning. Besides, we're in no greater danger here than we would be at home. I doubted if that was true. If they came for us at home, we'd probably be arrested, but if they found us here, well, we knew where we were. Still, Fritz was right about satisfying the microphone, so Mama reluctantly kissed us, each of us goodbye, and said she would return in the morning. She also promised to bring us enough food for another day's work, which cheered me up considerably. Even though I knew we had almost nothing in the apartment, she was my mother, and if she said she would bring food, then food was coming. Fritz and I continued working until long past dark. Mama had run into a sandy patch of dirt, so it came apart easily and wasn't as heavy to haul away. When it was very late, we at last made the decision to go upstairs. Are you sure you want to go? Fritz asked. I was sure I didn't. If there was anything I'd ever been so certain of in my life, it was that I didn't want to drag a door off the exposed top floor of this building. But it couldn't be Fritz who went. He was taller, and there was more of him to get caught in their searchlights. We went to the main floor. I wasn't comfortable here, since we could be seen from the back windows if someone happened by. But we'd spent enough time here earlier today to know where it was safe to stand. It was the upper floor that worried me. From my view out Anna's window, I knew she could see this level if she happened to look, which meant any number of other people could too. It would be a bright moon tonight, but the moon hadn't yet risen. All the more reason to hurry and get this over with while I still had some darkness on my side. Obviously, the main thing to avoid was being in the view of the watchtower guards. There were always lights on the tower at night, but I figured if I couldn't see the lights, then the guards shouldn't be able to see me. Be careful. It was a completely unnecessary thing for Fritz to say, but I was glad he said it anyway. I nodded and then started up the stairway to the upper floor. If I stayed against the far wall, I was in total shadow cast by the watchtower lights. A few glowing stars would help me see, but mostly I hoped my eyes would just adjust soon. Dirt and small rocks littered the stairs. That meant they could be slippery, and we'd have to carry the door down when we were finished. Dragging would make too much noise, especially if it pushed rocks down with it. At the top of the stairs, a wide hole in the roof gave clear sight to the watchtower. Since the hole was much closer to me than to them, I figured it was easy for me to see out rather for them to see in, and I prayed I was right. My urge was to hurry and get this over with, but I forced myself to move slowly. Slow would be harder for them to see. Slow kept me carefully thinking through every choice I made up here. The door was in the opposite corner from where I was crouched. Half of it remained in shadow, and the other half sat beneath the light of the stars. I patiently crept on all... thinking prompt. I want you to think about the author's craft here and how the author's building suspense, okay? I patiently crept on all fours toward the door, instantly aware of how still and quiet the night was. Every creak in the floor seemed magnified, so I was sure they could hear me. My breath seemed to echo in the air. Even the pounding of my heart was a drum that their dogs could surely hear, if not the guards themselves. Despite all that, I soon reached the door and lifted it to test its weight. It was made of solid wood. Very good news, because it could withstand the weight of the dirt when we tried to stabilize the tunnel, but bad news for moving it. I would have to drag it to the stairs. I wasn't worried about my strength in moving the door. Day after day of hauling dirt had made me much stronger than I used to be. But a heavy door would make more noise along the floor and probably leave a noticeable trail of dirt behind, one I couldn't clear without getting out into the open. I tugged at the door, but it didn't budge. I couldn't figure out what the problem might be. It should have moved in my hands. Then, with a high-pitched whine, the watchtower light powered on and I froze. There was no reason to panic yet. The lights always swooped around in the night, much like the paths of birds of prey, patrolling for anything on the ground that could be devoured. The light washed across the death strip and then up in the air. It shone through the broken-out windows above me, stealing too much of my shadow, but also revealing the problem with the door. A broken beam from the roof had fallen on the door, pinning it to the ground. I had to remove that beam. The watchtower lights swung in a pattern, 2 swoops over the ground to the south where I was, then once through the air as it moved to the right, then 2 swoops to the ground on the north. While the light went north, darkness returned. That was my chance to get the door. I used that moment now to dart forward, keeping my body low. By the time the light returned, I was closer to the broken beam, but safely back in the shadows. With the next round of darkness, I pushed at the beam, but only gave it one nudge before I had to withdraw again. When my next opportunity came, the beam wouldn't roll at first, and every shove caused a cracking sound that echoed through the quiet night. Determined to get it free, I pushed with every ounce of strength within me. Finally, it turned just enough to release the door. It took another several slow-motion minutes to get back into my original shadow. Then, 1 centimeter at a time, I began pulling the door again. I dragged it through the darkness and hid while the light swept past. How ironic that I had been so critical of East Berlin for feeling darker than the West. Now, that very darkness was my only hope to complete this task. So irony is like when something is odd or opposite to what it seems. So she used to hate the darkness and now she needs it to survive. After I got the door into total shadow, Fritz was there to help me carry it the rest of the way down the stairs. Only then did I feel safe enough to breathe again. With his help, we were soon back on the 2nd level. I wanted to return to the upper floor and brush over the drag marks, but Fritz insisted it wasn't worth the risk. I agreed without protesting. Not because I thought he was right, but because the idea of returning there turned my insides to jelly. That was as close as I ever wanted to come to being in the lights of the death strip. Okay, I don't know if you've noticed, but we're now 73% of the way through the book. I'm glad I decided to start doing 2 chapters at a time. Okay, chapter 37 is big. Don't have a lot of thinking prompts here. I just want you to kind of sit back and relax and enjoy the events of this chapter. Fritz and I had a surprise waiting for Mama when she returned the next morning. The door was already in place in the tunnel. It must have been a closet door once, we decided, because the narrow width was perfect for this space. And after we lifted it onto the dirt ceiling and added Fritz's mortared bricks to hold it up, we started pushing in other bricks to force the door upward. That part was incredibly hard, but Fritz was smart. He figured out how to raise the door little bits at a time with smaller wedges, then work the brick in to push the dirt upward. Did the door do any good, Mama asked. We didn't know, but the ground wouldn't sink any further, and Fritz said he would keep a better eye on the ceiling from then on. After her inspection was complete, Mama pulled out the food she had promised us. Several times during the night, I had wondered what she might bring, but never imagined anything this wonderful. There were meat patties, honey and crackers, some fruit, and even a few candies. Where did this come from? I asked gleefully. Mama frowned. Will you promise not to think too badly of me? Fritz and I agreed, and then she said, it was in Herr Krause's apartment. I figured he had lived there alone, and nobody had cleaned out his place yet. The food should go to somebody, why not us? But still, this is stolen food, and that was wrong. To make her feel better, I told Mama about taking the pulley. She scolded me properly for that, but not only for stealing, but for the risks I'd taken. I didn't mind. Knowing that her crime wasn't as bad as mine seemed to make her feel better, and that was good enough for me. While we were eating, Mama also pulled out a letter addressed to Fritz. He turned it over once in his hands, then frowned and tore it open. He had to hold up a flashlight to read it, and when he did, I saw the military stamp show through the paper. "What is it?" Mama asked. Fritz's eyes drifted from her over to me. "They changed the date for me to report to the military," he muttered. "I'm expected to begin serving on Monday." "That's only 2 days away." I nearly exploded. "You had until the end of the month. You're not even 18 for another 2 weeks. I worried about this. Mama's hands began shaking. Orders change sometimes. I put my hands over hers to steady them, but instead it made mine shake too. We had so far to go and still no idea of how we'd get back to the surface in the west. We'll never finish the tunnel by then. We were barely going to make it by next week. Fritz crumpled up the letter and threw it on the ground. "Yes, we will." He stood up and grabbed the shovel that began tearing into the wall. Without a word, I picked up the bucket to continue working while Mama quickly packed up the food. If we weren't finished in 2 days, then nobody could have finished it, because we would dig harder than anyone ever had before. When Fritz got tired, Mama took over for him, and while the one worked, the other helped me haul dirt up to the basement. Meter by meter, our tunnel grew and expanded. It was wider than it had to be, and the work wasn't as neat as Fritz and I had done in the beginning, but we were going forward. By early afternoon, Fritz and I were so tired that Mama insisted we sleep while she continued working. So we returned to the air raid shelter, and my eyes closed before my head even hit the ground. I wasn't sure how long she let us sleep, but it felt like hours. I only knew that when she called for us, we both sat up groggy and disoriented. Then Mama called again, and I raced into the tunnel with Fritz at my heels. Mama held up a hand for us to stop, and she motioned us for us to be silent. With urgency in her voice, she whispered, "Listen," and pointed to the end of the tunnel. I couldn't hear anything at first, but when I walked forward and pressed my ear against the dirt, a sort of sound did come through, thumping, digging. Something not far from us was hitting against rock. Someone else was tunneling. Panicked, the three of us retreated to the shelter to discuss the matter. "There must be other East Germans trying to escape," Fritz said. "Somehow our tunnels have intersected. If we connect with them, we can join our efforts." "If you're right, that's too risky," Mama said. "We don't know these other people, and we shouldn't tie our fate in with theirs. If they are found out, then we are found out." "But we can move so much faster then," Fritz said. "Besides, they didn't sound that far away. They'll probably connect with us at some point anyway. We might as well try to get to them and see how we can help each other." "I think the sounds came from ahead, toward us," Mama said. "Could it be Stasi, building a tunnel along the length of the death strip? That way, anyone who tries to cross underground will have to run into them." That was possible, maybe even likely. And if she was right, then it meant we were only a meter or so away from walking directly into their hands. "There's a third option," I said. "Maybe the tunnel is coming from the west. What if it's Papa?" I hadn't believed it until the words emptied from my mouth, but once they did, I knew I was right. Papa would never have asked us to dig. Fritz and Mama both told me that. But maybe he wasn't asking me to dig. Maybe the dance was telling me that he was already digging. Mama didn't seem convinced, but Fritz nodded his head and said, "He sent Gertrude the picture of the building. But it wasn't about where our tunnel should start. He was telling her where his tunnel would end. He wanted us to be ready for the time when he broke through." "What if you're wrong?" Mama asked. "How can we know it isn't the Stasi?" We couldn't know. Not for sure. But we couldn't stop digging either. Maybe when we broke through to the other tunnel, there might be other East Berliners or the Stasi. Or, as I was sure must be the case, we would find my father. What do you think, guys? Who's it going to be? All right, let's find out next time.